Welcome to Gorilla Sports Off Court. I am your host today and joined by the wonderful Brandon Cristal. And this is presented by Trusted American Mortgage. Trusted American salary-based mortgage consultants want to help you get into a better interest rate and lower your monthly payments. So head to trustedamerican.com to see how they can help you save some money today.
Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome in, everybody, to Gorilla Sports Off Court. I am Liv Moods. That is the wonderful Brandon Cristal. I'm live from my home studio. Brandon Cristal is live from the Gorilla Sports studio, and there is a reason for that. I flew in this morning after doing some March Madness games this weekend from Cleveland, and I had enough time, one would think, to get home, touch myself up, and get to where BK is right now. Well, BK, we were on E470 heading south, and all of a sudden we hear this like this weird like whipping noise. And I'm like, what is that? Then all of a
Flat tire?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It looks like there is a bullet. That is the way I can describe it. It looks like there's a bullet in his tire. So, of course, we have to pull off. If you've ever driven on E470, it's 75 miles per hour. I don't feel comfortable. Well, the greatest thing about it is BMW does not give you spare tires anymore in your cars.
Same with Teslas. I'm not trying to pick on Tesla, but I didn't know that until a friend that has a Tesla had to drive. He and his wife both of them had to drive to Leadville because she was camping.
Yeah.
And give his wife a spare tire. I didn't know BMW still did that
Yes.
as well.
So no spare tire. We had to call the roadside assistance. And of course, you know how that goes. They got to make a ticket claim. And it was a whole thing. We were sitting there for an hour. And finally, I look at him and I'm like, I have to leave you. I have to leave you on the side of the road. I have to call an Uber. We had pulled off on an off ramp that was closed. So trying to tell my Uber where we were, it was just a nightmare. But I feel terrible. He's actually with the tow truck driver right now. But I was like, I have an off court episode at 12:30. I cannot sit here any longer. So sure enough, I got my own Uber. I got home. I literally walked through the door maybe 10 minutes before we had to go live. But that's what you do when you've got Denver Nuggets ball to talk about. The Nuggets play tonight against the Chicago Bulls. And BK, in true Nuggets fashion, I'm unavailable and out of town doing other things. And they have a phenomenal game and upset the Houston Rockets. The last time they had a great game against the Phoenix Suns, I was getting engaged and could not be available. So maybe I need to lay off on watching the full 4 quarters because it seems like they start to pick things up when they don't have the Liv Moods eyeballs on them. But nonetheless, great win yesterday against the Houston Rockets, a team that we know has been one of the hottest right now in the league and is actually number 2 in the Western Conference. BK, what did you make of that game?
Yeah, and as I'll often tell you, that's not how sports works. You can watch all the games, watch all 4 quarters.
True.
They're going to win or lose.
I'll be watching them all.
Based on how well they play, not
Right.
on which fans are wearing a certain jersey or a hat or watching from the same seat on their couch. But I applaud superstitions. It's fine. Nonetheless, you knew that Portland was going to play hard. That's the one thing that Chauncey Billups has been able to get them to do this year is play hard. And there were certainly plenty of questions about the Denver native and his future in Portland. They made him change up his staff, which included letting his little brother Rodney go on that staff. And that was that's always the case when you don't have a head coach that's firmly entrenched that just makes a move, like Sean Payton moving on from the inside linebackers coach, not the one that got in trouble, but Greg Minuski last year with the Broncos. Some coaches just make moves. But when your team isn't playing well and the front office starts making you rework your staff, that's kind of not the beginning of the end, but like, hey, you are on notice that you will be next. And so credit to Chauncey Billups and his Blazers because they do play hard. And we saw that in the 2 games they played here last month as well.
I feel like they're one of those teams, BK. They're a better team than their record shows, just in the way that they play games. And look, to your point, the way that Chauncey Billups has allowed this team to become so competitive. So I do think that their record is not an accurate representation of how hard and tough they play.
Especially in a world, I know we're going to get to it, where there are plenty of bad teams that are tanking, trying to hopefully land Cooper Flag. And so we'll get into all that. But you knew that they were going to play you hard, and you didn't come ready to play. You played sloppy basketball, and they made you pay. And so if you would have said going into this final stretch after beating the Warriors, losing to the Lakers, that you were going to go 1-1, you would have figured, oh, we're going to beat the Blazers and come up short against the Rockets that had won 9 in a row. And that's
Right.
not really going to help in terms of leapfrogging the Rockets if it comes down to a tiebreaker, but it'll keep pace with keeping the Lakers and Grizzlies behind us by winning one of those last 2 games. But they did it in reverse order. They did it the hard way by losing to the Blazers, playing like garbage, and then playing really well, only allowing 15 points off turnovers yesterday and killing on the glass early on the offensive side. It ended up that the Rockets had more offensive rebounds by the end of the game, but it was like 10-3 in the middle of the third quarter. So the Rockets did come charging back. Some of those, I feel like the Nuggets may have let their foot off the gas, but Jamal Murray did what he was supposed to do, 39 points. Huge.
He did.
They
He
were
did.
7. So it was good. It was good to see that win and see them hold on and win a tight game, just like they did against the Warriors, but against a team that had all of its top players. And so you got to give them credit. Now see how they do in the revenge game against the Bulls. And will they get Joker back tonight? Signs are indicating that he should be available to return as early as this evening.
Would love to see that. And in honor of us trying to establish a new segment here on this show, I'm livid, BK, per usual. No, listen, it's interesting because I do find myself feeling the most livid after watching the Nuggets win. And it's such a weird feeling for me because normally that's where, you start to take a sigh of relief and you're feeling, okay, we're making things happen here. But no, I get more livid when I watch this Nuggets team win, especially against good teams. And I'm going to tell you why. Some of the losses, when you watch what they did against the Rockets, you watch what they can do against OKC, you watch what they can do against these teams that are in contention for a deep playoff run. It makes me livid to then see them against, I know Portland is better than their record may show, but it does feel like it's like 5 steps forward and 1,000 back. And that's where I get so frustrated. So I actually find myself feeling more frustrated and more livid after this Nuggets team wins, especially against good teams, because it shows that they can do it. They can do it. I have always said and thought in my brain this whole season, the ups and the downs, even in the downs, I have told myself they can do it. They have the talent. They have the roster. They've got the best player in the world. Despite the frustrations that Nuggets fans may feel with Coach Malone, he's still a good coach. So they have the pieces that they need to be a championship team, not just a contender, a championship team. So when I watch them win, when I watch them upset the Houston Rockets, yeah, it's very frustrating, especially when they're without Nikola Jokic and you're seeing what Jamal Murray can do when he really fires it up, especially coming off of injury. So yeah, I'm actually more livid this season when I watch them win against good teams, because then we watch them lose against really bad teams. And it's just like, can we meet in the middle somewhere? Can we find a middle ground? Because it does feel like this Denver Nuggets team is on 2 sides of the spectrum. They are on the extreme of both the good and the bad. So it makes me livid.
And I should clarify, because I'm just going back over some of the post-game stuff from Houston yesterday. And Michael Malone said that he doesn't expect Joker to play tonight, but will return on this 5-game homestand.
I did see that. Yeah, I didn't know if he was returning this evening, but in the 5 home games that they've got, he did say that he expects him to be back. And
so as we go through and ride the wave with every win and every loss, and I always try to calm things down when it looks bad,
especially with me.
Including losses to Washington, a second loss to Portland. It is worth noting it got overshadowed because that same night you were busy doing 4 hours of live TV, live internet work, live programming when they played on a Thursday night a week or so before Christmas in Portland, because the Broncos were taking it to the Chargers until the game ended, but they were up 21-0 in that game. I actually texted Chauncey Billups during that game. I'm like, are you in your office watching this game? And he's like, hell yeah, I am, because the game tipped at like 8 o'clock Pacific or 7 o'clock Pacific. And the football game kicked at 5:15 or whatever.
Right.
So he was definitely watching that first half. I'm sure he came back in and like, what the hell did the Broncos do? But his team won that game too. So we've seen Portland beat them, like you mentioned, the 2 losses to Washington.
You're good.
I get that the Bulls are a playoff caliber team. I think they were 9th at last check, so they're in the play-in mix. But you gave up 24 threes to them last time. You got to be better tonight. And one of the things that we saw Michael Malone say post game is, and this is kind of what I was getting to, is if we can find a way to be that team every night, I really like our chances. And that's the point, is we know what the ceiling is. They are
Yeah.
capable of playing like this, of protecting the
see it, yeah.
basketball, making good decisions, rebounding well, playing solid defense, making things hard on the other team's best score, even if they're going to get to 30, making them take a bunch of shots to get there. And so that is what I always kind of go back to. It's like, they can be this. The game hasn't passed Malone by. The message isn't falling on deaf ears all the time, but there are times where you're like, are they even listening to what he and his other coaches are saying? I understand that, that kind of line of thinking. But when you see what you saw last night, see what you saw against Golden State, know what they can be when they've played really well with Joker in there and with AG, which hasn't been a lot because of AG's injuries, how good they can be. And so that's where you got to at least cross your fingers that it could be a deep playoff run if they come out every night dialed in. And I know that's a big if, but they are capable of doing that.
I think they have got to go into every game for the remainder of the season as if every team is better than them. I think sometimes this Nuggets team just knows that they have the talent, but talent is a fraction of what you need to be a contending team. You need healthy bodies. You need, yes, the talent. You also need the brain, which we know Nikola Jokic possesses. He's got that very high basketball IQ, but he hasn't been available. So you got to have other guys that are stepping up. You've got to have consistency. You've got to see their good habits being formed and consistently being shown. So you've got to have defense, not just in one quarter, but in all 4 quarters. So there's things that I think this Nuggets team, they do take their foot off the gas quite a bit, whether it's in a game in the 3rd quarter, the 2nd quarter, or it's in the season. And so some of this could be strategic. I've made a couple of videos that have gone out where we've talked about, BK. Is this a strategy? Are they more concerned with the health of their guys than they are about the seeding in the Western Conference? Because any team in the West is a threat. That is just the facts of the matter. So I do think some of this is strategic, yes. But I think if you mess around with your food a little too often, that becomes your norm. I actually flash myself back to my dancing days. And there's this thing called, what is it? When it's just in your body and you don't even have to think about it. What is that called?
Second nature?
Muscle memory. I'm sorry. We
Muscle
need good habits to become muscle memory for this Nuggets team. So they can kind of shut their brain off and just play basketball. But because we see this 5 steps forward and 50 steps back situation with them all season long, the good habits that they form in the second game against OKC, against the Houston Rockets, in these big wins, the good habits that they're showing and that they're forming don't become muscle memory. I think actually the worst version of this Nuggets team is still what feels like muscle memory sometimes, which is just the complacency on defense, the lackadaisical first half where the pace is not super fast and they're not really playing with a lot of aggression. That is muscle memory right now and not the version of them we know they can be. So that's where it gets frustrating. Is I want to see that enough times that I'm like, oh, yeah, when the playoffs come around, 7-game series against whoever, they're good. I don't feel that way yet because I don't think that's what feels like muscle memory to them. So only time will tell. But BK, I do want to kind of go around the league really quick and talk about Cooper Flagg. He's on everybody's radar. Everybody wants him. And we've been watching. I was just in Cleveland watching March Madness. And I really do just have to say my condolences, BK, to your Kansas Jayhawks because, wow. But I will say BK is the type of fan where you did prepare yourself for this potential given what their season looked like. So it's not like BK, I'm sure you weren't overly devastated. You're a pretty relaxed fan in comparison to myself.
Well,
but
it depends on the year, but knowing how this team performed, it's not that I was preparing. There was an expectation. And so even when they lose to Arkansas, but they had a lead late in that game, they were up by 5 in the second half of the second half, like within 10 minutes. It was still not a surprise they blow it down the stretch because it's just what this team's been this year. So there are other years where we're a 1 seed and we get knocked off earlier than the Final Four, which is obviously most years for most teams, that it's not devastating, but it can ruin. My birthday is a week from today. One of my best friends from college, who's part of our main Jayhawk texting group, his birthday was yesterday. Another friend's is March 9th, which is never going to be an issue with the tournament, but like we might blow the seeding or the Big 12 tournament. So we're used to being disappointed. We just wanted the season to be over with. I'm now more bummed that my bracket, although I've watched the least amount of college basketball I probably ever watched in my life this season, my bracket, it's not totally busted. I have 3 Final Four teams left, but Iowa State's out. So Florida, my champion's still in. Nonetheless, I don't think I'm going to win money either. So I might even get the championship right. Florida beating Duke if that comes to pass.
Yeah.
And it still won't be enough, if you will. But I got to go to the games here in Denver. You got to go to games in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Nothing beats that atmosphere.
Oh, no. There's really nothing better. I actually have a funny story that I will share really quick. I made a little video kind of like joking around mostly because I was on the underdog against Michigan State. And because I just love underdogs, by the way, you guys. I don't have a stake in any of this. I don't.
You were on them to cover, right?
No.
Oh, you're on them to win outright.
Listen, I like to take in March, we take risks that don't always make sense. Okay. And it's just for the plot and it's just fun. All right. I just like to have fun. All right. But I'm sitting at that game, I'm filming content, whatever. And I just kind of make a selfie video where I'm like, are all Michigan fan bases just annoying AF? Like they kind of are. And so that was just kind of a joke, right? Well, just last night when we were there was an incident where BK, you know how much equipment costs for our job. It's not cheap. It's never cheap. Our FanDuel microphone was stolen out of my coworker's purse. We had stepped away from the table, and I know everyone's going to say, don't do that, don't do that. We stepped away from the table for 2 seconds. We were maybe 5 steps away to take a picture. These younger guys, Michigan State fans, came up, grabbed it out of her purse. We're looking everywhere for it. Security comes up to us and says, are you guys looking for a FanDuel mic? We're like, yeah, where is it? He's like, I just saw a group of guys messing around with it. I thought it was theirs. I'm like, no, it's definitely not. I have to give the most shout out to this arena, Cleveland, the Cavs arena. They pulled security footage in 3 minutes. We had that microphone back. These kids were getting kicked out. They were going to contact Michigan State University. They banned them from the arena. And then they came up to us and they're like, do you want to press charges? We're like, we'll just take our mic back. Can we just get the mic back and leave? We don't need to do all that. But all that to say, it is madness in every sense of the word. Fans are crazy. Michigan State fans, I met quite a few. They are also crazy. So to your point, yeah, the madness is real in every sense of the word. And we got to experience like every layer of that, including theft. What do you know?
And I'll shout out just the basketball fans in Denver. We know how great Nuggets fans are.
Yes.
We know how many Lakers fans there happen to be as well. And we know that lots of years CU and CSU don't always put the best product out. I got to shout out, or Air Force for that matter, Wyoming for go up and down the Front Range DU. No one's ever really accused the Rocky Mountain region of being a true basketball hotbed. I guess New Mexico, if you want to extend all the way down there, we know New Mexico lots of years has been good, but still never great. Point being, this stretch has always been more about football, even when there's been some good years with different teams. And so I got to give the fans credit because every single time, and that arena, which formerly Pepsi Center Ball Arena, has hosted now 6, 7, 8 times since 2004. And we do know that the last Final Four to not be in a dome was at Old McNichols when UNLV and Duke, when UNLV ran them out of the gym in 1990. But college basketball is always big here. And every time they announce that first weekend of games and put those tickets on sale, they sell out and the arena is packed. You know, I was at the practices on Wednesday. I was like, he's going to be a little light. And I watched Wisconsin practice. I watched BYU. I understand it's spring break and also just the middle of the day. So didn't know. And I wasn't around when Michigan practiced later in the day. We know how many fans there are from the Midwest that have found their way here. You know, we see that with obviously the Wisconsin bars and knowing how many people we know from various Midwest cities, Chicago, Detroit, whatever. But I went into that early game on Thursday and Wisconsin was playing in that first game and it was packed to the gills with just basketball fans, Wisconsin fans, BYU fans, all of that. But it was awesome to see that no matter who the teams are, and I understand fans are going to try to find their way, but I had people just asking me, hey, I want to take my kid. I want to go to the game, or I'm just going to go down and scalp a ticket. Tickets were not cheap for the Saturday games. It was $300 was the cheapest ticket up top.
Okay.
It happens every couple years. And there's not going to be another one here until the earliest now would be 2029 because the 26, 7, and 8 arenas have already been picked out. And so I imagine that Denver will get either the first weekend. We actually haven't had a second weekend, maybe in forever. We were supposed to get it in 2021 because of COVID. They did that whole tournament in Indianapolis
Mm-hmm.
where the whole all 68 teams were there, 64, whatever it was that year. But so there's a chance that it'll be one of those either opening weekend, second weekend in at least 29 or 30. But props to Denver basketball fans. And we know it's always the same 18,000 people, but that they packed that place because we just want to see good college hoops, and got to see it, especially Saturday with that A&M Michigan game,
Yeah.
and Michigan able to come back, and then a really fun game with BYU and Wisconsin where CSU's transfer time had a chance to give his team a shot at overtime, and it just came up short. And then also mentioning CSU, two things that came down today. Our pal Sean Keeler from the Denver Post reports Niko Medved headed home to Minnesota, went to Minnesota. His wife's from there. Minnesota's not an easy place to win. In the Big Ten's not easy. They don't have the same. They obviously have a huge alumni base there. They call it the U in Minneapolis. It's about the Gophers and other Big Ten schools, but the Gophers are big there. But they still don't have the resources Michigan or Ohio State do. And so it's going to be hard. But in a world of transfer portal and this and that, Nico's going home. I wouldn't be surprised if Ali Farouk Manesh gets promoted on his staff. I'm still mad at him making that shot for Northern Iowa back in 2011 to beat my Jayhawks, but I tell him every time I see him. Either way, Nico's leaving CSU in a better spot than when he got there. And what a game that they played against Maryland yesterday.
You should be proud.
You hit the big three. You think you're going to win it. You're up 6. You got to get a stop. And then Derek Queen, All-American freshman, just a star player coming in, Maryland's best player. Maybe he traveled, maybe he didn't. By the letter of the law, Gene Steratore said he didn't. Either way, a lot of steps. He makes a hell of a shot over really good defense. And when you lose like that, you shake each other's hands and say, man, they just got us on that last second shot. But fun weekend of college hoops, and bummer for CSU on both fronts. If they lose and they lose their star coach, but understanding he wasn't going to Iowa.
Right.
It's a different program because CSU is going to the Pac-12. In theory, you're going to have just more eyeballs, more resources, but it's hard to say no to going home, and we understand that.
Absolutely. Yeah, March Madness is great, and it's one of the most fun times of the year. I think we're so blessed to do what we do because it never ends. While that can be exhausting, it is also very fun. There's always something to talk about. So let's continue talking a little bit about March Madness, but let's get a little bit more specific, which is Cooper Flag. You mentioned teams potentially tanking at this stage of the season to get Cooper Flag. Before we talk about how you feel about teams tanking for Cooper Flag, in a perfect world, BK, you know a lot about the NBA, you know a lot about college hoops, you know a lot about what teams need. Which team do you see him making the most sense on when it comes to the NBA, when you're looking at the teams that are probably the most likely to get him? Although we'll see a lot of teams tanking at this point in the season, but the team that's the most likely to get him that you also feel like is a really good fit for him, where would you put him? If you could just pick him up and put him somewhere.
He grew up in Maine, so it's not like, oh, he's a Chicago kid, or he's from South Florida, he's from SoCal, or he's from Texas. Grew up in Maine. You talk about a unicorn, and we know basketball talent can come from everywhere, whether it's Sombor, Serbia, or France, or whatever it may be. And so it's not like, oh, get him to the Celtics. We know the Celtics are obviously not going to have him.
Right.
But so you look at the teams that are really going to have the best chance statistically, the Jazz, and we know they love their white stars in Utah.
They do. They really do.
They've got Lauri Markkanen. They've got Walker Kessler's an interesting player. It would be hard to understand that basketball-wise because Markkanen and Cooper Flag are very similar players, I think, to some degree. And with Walker Kessler there, he's obviously a true center, and Flag's really that kind of stretch four, super bouncy. But, if you're going to look at a starting lineup, kind of the way Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Garnett, that type of player that's going to be, a 4, not a 5, even if he is close to 7 feet. And so I'm going to take Utah off the list just because it's not very exciting. The Pelicans with Zion is exciting. And
I like that.
And then the team that has less of a chance, not because of where their ping pong balls are and they won too many games early, but the Spurs, the Spurs have 31 wins. Pelicans have 19. The Jazz have 16. So that's your West. Him with De'Aaron Fox and Wemby, that would be the most fun for the NBA. San Antonio is not a marquee town, but I would argue that the NBA has realized in a world where, look, is it good when the Lakers and Knicks are relevant? Celtics, Bulls, even
Of
although the
course.
Bulls haven't really been relevant in forever. Sure. But because of the international enthusiasm, and I'm not even picking a city or a country or whatever, and just the growth of the game, and you don't have to wait till the All-Star game to watch your favorite player. You can watch them every night. You see their highlights every night. The world got smaller. That's why in OKC, Kevin Durant still had Sprint commercials and his own Jordan shoe. It wasn't because he was playing in the 40th biggest market or whatever it was. And so if he were to end up in San Antonio, now you're getting people excited to see the Spurs when they aren't from the biggest city. They aren't in Dallas. They aren't in Houston. They're in San
Creates a
Antonio.
little bit of hype. Yeah.
I wouldn't want to see it for the Nuggets' sake because you give Wemby Cooper Flag, plus now he has De'Aaron Fox. You talk about 3 building blocks. That is as good as it gets from the youth standpoint. Then you go to the East, the 2 worst teams there, the Wizards, who seem to have the Nuggets number without Cooper Flag, but they've only got 15 wins. That's lowest in the entire NBA. And again, 2 of them against your Nuggets. And then Charlotte, if LaMelo were to stay, LaMelo and Cooper Flag together is interesting, but Charlotte, unless you had Larry Johnson and Alonzo Mourning, just hasn't been good in forever.
Right.
So it'd be hard to. And then Philly would be the next there. Philly and the Nets. Brooklyn, Toronto's right there too. All of them though are in the 20s, 23, 24 wins for Philly, Brooklyn, and the Nets. So I think basketball-wise, Charlotte with LaMelo would be interesting. And
Spurs.
The Spurs would be the most fun.
Yeah.
Pelicans, though, New Orleans certainly doesn't have any kind of national fan base, even with Zion. But does Cooper Flag keep Zion on the court more? They obviously traded Brandon Ingram, so there's room for him there. Wherever he goes, as long as it's not Utah, just because that's boring. It'd be fun to see. And it's just wild to see the way these teams are doing this and risking getting fined. Like the Mavericks were fined $750,000 a couple of years ago for how they handled their final week, but they had a pick that was protected inside the top 10 as long as they finished, inside the top 10 in the draft, even with the lottery. And so they had to lose as many games to ensure that. So it cost them $750,000, but then they drafted Derek Lively. Yeah. And that was worth it because he helped them obviously get to a finals.
Yeah. Well,
where do you want to see Cooper Flag?
As you were talking, I do. For some reason, I can't picture LaMelo anywhere else, but I do think LaMelo needs a better supporting cast around him. Like, I just think that would be a rejuvenation for not only Charlotte, but also for LaMelo, and I want that for him. So I lean Charlotte. I think Charlotte for Cooper Flag makes a lot of sense in terms of keeping LaMelo there and giving him a little bit more in his supporting cast. And it would be an interesting dynamic between the two. So, yeah, that's kind of where I lean right now. But
do you want to know LaMelo's middle name, by the way?
Do I know his real name?
No, his middle name.
No, what is it?
LaMelo LaFrance, L.A., France.
Well, that's a lot of la.
Well, LeVar really a big fan of the L's and the L.A. sounds, or LeAngelo is L.I., Lonzo's L.O., LaMelo LaFrance.
LaMelo LaFrance Ball.
I had him on the radio when he was in high school when he scored 100 points or whatever it was. He had some crazy game. We reach out to the coach. Coach, he's a sophomore in high school, mind you. Coach gets him on with us. This was at KOA. Dave Logan and Rick Lewis had him on. And so the coach is like, hey, great to talk to you, whatever. Yeah, let me hand him the phone. He goes, this is Melo. Hey, man, you're going to be on in Denver.
Well, I've heard
a 15, 16-year-old kid, but I was like, okay.
I've seen some research where they've said that, like, how you name your child does, like, obviously there's circumstantial situations with this, but like naming your child does like give them better opportunities at success. If you were named LaMelo LaFrance Ball and you were a flop in life, like you can't really, you really just can't afford to be a flop at that point. With that kind of a name, you got to be something and you got to be somebody, and he's something and he's somebody. So I don't know.
Well, maybe he's on a new deal that's got him there through 2029, $204 million, similar to Jamal's deal that he signed. So they would have to move him. So yeah, he's obviously their building block. We get that.
For sure.
Cooper Flag do make Charlotte relevant, and so I can't make the argument. Although Wemby's already there, but it's not fair to say, oh well, San Antonio is not a marquee franchise, marquee city. But I'd like to see him there, but I don't want to see him in Charlotte because basketball-wise, with LaMelo, it becomes really interesting knowing that the East, like look at your powerhouse in the East. The Celtics aren't going anywhere because of the age of
correct
Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown.
The East needs rejuvenated like big time.
And I don't want to see him in Philly no matter what, because Philly just ruins stuff. Paul George killing my fantasy team. Joel Embiid
Philly
may never
just sucks the
play.
life out of everybody. So we're not
It's-
doing that to Cooper Flag.
It's
Sorry.
unbelievable. And maybe it's karma going back to they didn't trust the process enough and ended up letting Sam Presti leave after he started the process. And then they bring in Jerry Colangelo to advise on who their next GM should be. And shocker of all shockers, the best GM Jerry Colangelo could find turned out to be his son, Brian Colangelo, who ran that team poorly for a couple of years. And so I still think that they're just, dealing with all of that. And they couldn't keep Jimmy Butler. Who else did they let? There was somebody else that they let go that they shouldn't have. And I understand Jimmy Butler can create problems on his own.
Yeah.
I just don't see him. I just don't see Cooper Flag in Philly. I want to see him somewhere fun where the basketball is going to be fun.
Charlotte's fun. Charlotte's
beaten
fun.
up.
I like Charlotte. That feels like a good idea.
So Charlotte, Spurs, even the Pelicans, playing him next to Zion.
Those are
would be
all
really
three fun. Yes,
Yeah.
those are all three fun teams.
What about
Watch them
Washington?
go-
Washington has no stars. I'm not sorry, Jordan
But
Poole.
just-
I know they
but-
traded for Chris Middleton, but
Does that kind of feel like, the same conversations we have with like quarterbacks that get drafted early? It's like, or first overall, you don't want them to go somewhere where it feels like they've got all this pressure to turn around an entire franchise because they're that bad. Like you almost want to put Cooper Flag somewhere where he can make an impact, but it's not all on him.
well, Washington
know?
hasn't been good. I mean, how about this? They had Chris Webber and Juwan Howard together at one point. That
Yeah.
never worked. We're not going to count the 2 years with Michael Jordan, but they were so bad as a team. He felt like he had to come out of retirement to try to help them. I don't even know the last time that they won a playoff series, let alone gotten past the second round. They won a championship in the late 70s with Wes Unseld, but that was 50 years ago.
Right.
So I don't know why Washington is as snake bitten as they are as a franchise, but they certainly have a realistic shot. Nonetheless, we're seeing all these teams, and I think that's the bigger conversation, that are going out of their way to try to tank to have the best shot at Cooper Flag. No one's confusing him with Wemby, but he does feel like a generational talent. That's the way
For
he's
sure.
being characterized.
Yeah.
And so I think that I understand why teams are doing it to have that shot, but it's making for bad basketball here down the stretch.
I was going to say,
Worse
part of me wants to
basketball.
say, just out of the principle of it, that teams that intentionally tank don't deserve a generational talent. Sorry. Am I
Well, and
petty?
so-
Yes, most women are. Get over it. But, that kind of feels like, whatever. But it is, at the end of the day, in these moments when we are talking about teams tanking to get a generational talent, I do have to often remind myself, this is a business. This is a business because everybody's tush is on the hot seat when you have a losing season and you're not doing well. So desperate times call for desperate measures. There's a lot of teams out there that are looking at their season or the last few seasons or the last decade of seasons going, we could use a guy like that. So it's very understandable. I vote Charlotte. 1, the Eastern Conference needs to be rejuvenated. We're bored. I'm yawning. 2, Cooper Flag, LaMelo Ball. I like it. And I also like that for LaMelo Ball as well. 3, Charlotte's just a fun place to play. And like you said, Cooper Flag deserves to be somewhere fun.
Well,
So-
and I didn't really finish my thought on the East, but after the Celtics, we'll
Yeah.
see about the Knicks. The Knicks appear to be built right, but
Yeah.
Karl Anthony Townsend getting younger. Jalen Brunson's not as young as people think, and oft injured, unfortunately. The Bucks, though, with Giannis, I don't know how many great years he has, but we know Dame Lillard can't have that many more. And so,
You got to
I'm not
think
ready
his
to-
time is slowly.
Orlando and Cleveland are ascending, so got to give them credit. Miami is
Yep.
going to have to, build their entire team now around an all-star in Tyler Hero and a off an all-star in Bam Adebayo. So Miami will be there, but there's plenty of room for Charlotte to come up in the East because
Mhm.
it does feel like Philly, even with Paul George on that long deal and with Embiid under contract, forever, but who knows if he's going to ever play again. Let's just take Philly off the board, but that there is room in the East for Charlotte to come in and make some noise if they were to end up with Cooper Flag. And so I think that it's going to be fun to see, but as I'm looking through different ideas, and I got to give whoever wrote this on ESPN credit, got a couple authors, one who thinks Joker did the league a disservice last week by now missing 5 games. Or
Yeah,
4
let him
games,
just
whatever.
let's just have him untwist his ankle, BK. That
But
should do it.
This is a couple. There's a couple people. Kevin Pelton's on this too with Tim Bontemps, and so they've got 5 ideas. Flatten the lottery odds even more, and so it's just every team has the same odds.
Right.
That totally eliminates tanking, and I don't hate it. But I could understand there being pushback. Count wins instead of losses after the All-Star break. So the more you
Ooh,
win after the break, you have a better chance. Um,
I like that. I like
so
that.
that's interesting. Then rework the protected pick that way, something like with the Mavericks.
Hmm.
That's out the window. I like this one maybe the most. Have the lottery odds determined by how those teams fare against each other. So then it's
Would
on
you
you to
keep it in
try
the
to play
conference then?
what's that?
Would you keep it in the conference, or would it just be out of the pool of teams
No,
that
out of those 14 teams, I mean, I think you adjust it because obviously you're going to play 4
right.
games against, but it's adjusted percentage wise.
Okay. I don't
And
mind
so they
that.
figure out how to weight that, whatever happens next. Then all of a sudden, though, a team that just misses the playoffs or their
Right.
best player goes down, like we saw with the Warriors a couple of years ago when they ended up with the number 1 pick, when both Clay and Steph were out for essentially the whole year.
Yeah.
Or with what you're getting right now with the Spurs, where Wemby goes down right after the break, and you're like, well, the season's shot. Now we're going to give them a because they'd beaten all the crappy teams early. They beat the Jazz twice already, and they beat Brooklyn in both times they played because it's all already happened. So
Right.
that's still a little wrought with flaws, but I don't hate it.
Okay.
And then enforce the current rules. So that's the ones is just make sure everyone is like, obviously if you're going to sit a guy, you're going to dress him and then not play him. That's what happened with the Raptors more than anyone. And the Jazz just did it as well, where they're starting their guys and then not playing them in the second half or playing them down the stretch. And so there's no perfect system, but I think Adam Silver, where you do give him credit, is that he is always willing to listen to stuff. Stars were sitting too much. That's when they made that 75% threshold. You got to play 65 games or more, or you're not getting all NBA. You're not winning Defensive Player of the Year, MVP, whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. Hopefully, somewhere fun. Let's get into, before we get out of here, BK, just thoughts on tonight's matchup against the Bulls. I think it's safe to probably assume Nikola Jokic won't be back yet. Clearly, Jamal Murray got some much needed rest. He looked great against the Rockets. So, hoping to see that same performance from him tonight or something similar to it. What do you expect from the Denver Nuggets tonight as they take on a team that they should beat, but we also know how that goes. Every time we say that, feels like then the games are a little too close for comfort and don't always end in our favor. So, what are your thoughts on maybe what the Nuggets need to do to make sure that they win tonight, and how you predict it's going to go?
Well, and the Bulls have been playing pretty good basketball of late. They've won 7 of their last 9 coming in, including
Okay,
2 in a row at the Kings and at the Lakers. So
those
we
are
know
big
that,
wins.
and they scored 146 points against the Lakers. So obviously they make the trade and send Zach LaVine to Sacramento as part of that trade. But Kobe White's playing really well,
Yep.
and they obviously have some young players. You can't let them score from behind the line the way you did. You can't give up 24 threes. Can't let them take 53. You can let them take 53s, but better make sure they're guarded. And you can't come off a game where you play as well as you did against a good team in Houston and lay an egg, knowing the Bucks are coming in on Wednesday. You have to pick up where you left off last night, and not just Jamal, but everybody. And you probably need to score a little more consistently across the board. Last night you got 17 from MPJ, but after that it was 14 from Russ, 13 from AG, 11 from CB, 11 from DeAndre out. 11 feels like a good night for him. But
For
in
sure.
general, you've got to spread the scoring around a little more
Yep.
and probably make a couple more threes of your own.
I agree. I mean, BK, I read that on the last show, that wonderful stat that you provided me that you also got from one of your buddies, which is what, when they make 15 plus threes, they're like 15-5 this
Yeah,
season. So
yeah, you'll take it if you can get to 15 threes.
absolutely. So
And
I
even
think,
north of 12, you're good.
right.
Better.
So I think, in addition to the great offense that they have been running all season, sprinkling in some of those threes, no one's saying you got to live and die by the three, but you do got to play the three in both ways, offensively and defensively. You got to defend the perimeter, and you also have to get some 3-point shots to fall, because we know that that's just where the league's at right now. If you're not a big fan of 3-point shooting, too bad. That's where they're at. So, yeah, I think I'll be at the game. So I'll be delivering some social media content throughout my page a little bit, and of course with Gorilla Sports, and then I'm gonna give my final thoughts towards the end of the game from Ball Arena, like BK does. I'm pulling a BK today. I'm feeling it. But
You're gonna
yeah.
crush it as always. I'm sure it'll far exceed anything I've done. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. And
Oh
then
no, BK, give yourself some credit. You're phenomenal.
huge game Wednesday. We got our pal Shelby Harris and his Bucks. He'll be on the hardwood. We'll try to get him to get into some trash talk pregame and maybe even talk trash to him postgame after the
You
Nuggets.
just got to go right up
last.
to him and stick a mic in his face and just get whatever raw footage you can of Shelby Harris talking his trash. But yeah, it's a big, honestly, couple of big games for the Nuggets this week, and we'll be keeping you very close to the analysis of it all. You know, keeping you updated on the injury reports. Hopefully, we get some word about Nikola Jokic and his return. Hopefully, it's sooner rather than later. But also, there's a part of me that's like, listen, if he's got to rest more, then so be it. That's what he needs to do, and we want him healthy for the playoffs. So
I don't know. By the way, I want to correct myself because I kept saying they play Utah at the end of the season. They play Utah at the end of the month, but that's the only game they have against a team not in the playoffs. So you get 5 games at home: Chicago, Milwaukee, Utah, revenge game with Minnesota, and then an ailing Spurs team that you know is going to try to do all they can to get Cooper Flag. And then you wrap it up with 6 more games against all playoff teams with Golden State, Indiana, Sacramento, Memphis, and Houston. I guess that's 5 games. I'm not good at math, but you're gonna get a little break Friday, knowing that the Jazz will do all they can to not win the game.
Yep.
But 5-game homestand gives you a chance to go 5-0 and continue to not only set a tone but keep pace with the Rockets. Make sure that the Lakers and Grizzlies stay behind you, so you can be locked into that second or third spot. So you don't have to worry about OKC until that final or until that Western Conference final round.
How many games are we now behind Houston after beating them last night?
I will tell you right this second. It was like probably a game or game and a half. Why don't I?
That's what I thought. So we should be right on there chasing their coattails right now.
Yeah. With now a game in hand, they are 1 game back. Sorry. So they're 1 game with the win. They're 1 game behind the Rockets, and they'll play again one more time, as I mentioned. And so that'll give you a chance to then get that tiebreaker, because this is one of those years where they only play Houston 3 times.
Yeah.
And so, and some of that has to do
and
with
we lost on the road to them earlier this year, right? Pretty bad.
No. That was the game at home. The only time they. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so
15th,
yesterday's
right?
was away. First one was home that we lost.
No, you're right.
Okay, that's what I thought.
No. I was right. I was not looking back far enough.
Who's right these days?
I was right. They only played them 3 times this year because they played the Clippers 5 times. The balancing of the schedules isn't exactly what it once was. There are just some random years where you're going to play a team 3 times, but because of the in-season tournament, they have to mix and match, and so the matrix gets a little bit trickier, the scheduling matrix. And so this is one of those years where they only play Houston 3 times, but that game is in Houston again, final regular season game of the year. That could come down to the battle for the second and third spot. I was
going to say, that game might mean more than, I don't know.
And you won't know who you're facing as the 7th seed.
Right.
You might know who you are as a 6th seed, although you may not know across the board because of teams jockeying for that play-in.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a question of, we don't care as long as we're not worried about OKC until that last round. But it could be like, oh, I don't want to play Golden State. I'd rather play the Clippers. But if you are 2, then you don't know who it's going to be. It's going to be 7 through 10.
Right.
Because of the play-in that you could potentially go against. Nonetheless, if they need to rest guys that day, they might. We'll see. It's a 1:30 tip. That's where I got confused.
I'm the only thing I'm dreading about that, BK, is that again, the Spurs game last year meant more than it should have, and now we're probably going to be right back where we were last year, where that last game.
This year it's a Friday against Memphis. You know, last year you lost to the Spurs on the Friday, and then it didn't matter that you beat Memphis on Saturday.
Right.
Oh, I guess it did matter because it locked you into the 2 spot, as opposed to had you lost that game, you would have been the 3 seed.
True.
So that sort of matters. But it was that Friday night game against the Spurs and Wemby going nuts in the second half. So all these games matter, though. It's a 10 game. It's a 10 game. Is my math right on that? 10 games. Yeah. 5 at home here in a row, 7 out of your final 10 at home.
Yeah.
Your roadies are at Golden State, home at Sacramento, home at Houston. So not crazy trips, easy enough trips, all 2-hour flights. And so, or less. And so, yeah, they're going to be poised to lock into that second spot.
And that's what we need. That's what we need. All right. Well, I will keep you guys covered on all things Denver Nuggets ball tonight. Want to give a shout out to our producer as well as our photog videographer, Jet, who is just crushing it these days. He's at everything. He'll be at the game with me tonight. He's up early, he's out late, he's driving here, he's driving there, he's getting on planes with BK. So shout out to our producer Jet for everything he does and also just how stinking talented he is. I'll be with him tonight. We'll get you guys some content while we're there, and hopefully it's all smiles for the post-game reaction with Liv Moods. If I'm frowning, I think you know how the game ended, but nonetheless, we'll keep you posted on all things Denver Nuggets ball. BK, thank you for joining me. BK will also be keeping us up to date on all things home games this week. Bucks, like we're going to get Shelby, hopefully get some thoughts from Shelby Harris. So lots to come. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube and following us on all things social. And this is presented by Trusted American Mortgage. You can head to trustedamerican.com to see how they can help you save some money. Shout out to our friends at Trusted American for getting people better interest rates and lower monthly payments. I'm Liv Moods. That's BK. And this has been another Guerrilla Sports Off Court. We'll see you very soon. Bye.